talk about their interest or discipline, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And the threat is really, if people don't volunteer, I'll have to do it. If you don't want to hear my dulcet tones, get on the email and send us one volunteering your services, please.
Andy, the chat box has already gone mad. I can see there's 27 responses already. Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to In the Air Tonight. This is obviously, as we've said before, the BMFA series of webinars aimed at introducing you all to areas of our sport maybe you haven't actually seen or even heard of before, other than reading, I guess. So tonight's session is brought to you by Doug Hunt. It's titled A Peek into Scale Aeromodelling. So I think without further ado, Doug, we'll let you take us through it.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Hello, everybody. I'm hoping that this will be a very light-hearted look into all of the disciplines for Scale. Just a quick introduction to me. I have been a modeler since I was about 10, so that's 60 years worth of the normal Keelcraft scale, free flight power, and so on. I've tried most disciplines from easy bees to sort of 2-3 meter soarers, so I've got a bit of a experience in most things. In my teenage years, I moved house with my parents up to the Birmingham area, where I joined a Handsworth club there, and washing my mouth out, I flew combat models and various control line stuff. But one thing that did happen at that period was that I met a chap called Tony Day. Tony Day was a well thought of control line scale modeler who participated in world championships and the national championships around the mid to late 60s. And handling his models, looking at his models as a kid, actually inspired me to move towards scale, which I did. So post-university, I set up shop in Derby, and I met Mike Hadland. I organised a few local meetings for indoor models. Peanut flying was just starting to take accelerate at that time, coming from America. And then I met up with Butch Hadland, who was another great inspiration for me. And thereafter, I spent time organising various indoor meetings for the Nottingham Club at the University in Nottingham. And that led on to organising the first couple of interscales that were held in the UK. I'd introduced Doug Shepherd to the hall at the university. He was the current STC chairman at the time. And those interscales took root then. And while they've not been a regular occurrence in the format that we first run them, they still run on an annual basis, the vestiges of those initial interscales at the Nijmegen indoor meeting. So basically, I've been involved in organisation of various things for getting on for 50 years with a bit of a block out because of business commitments. But I'm not a competitive modeler. I'm not in the sport to win competitions. So this presentation tonight won't have a strong competition focus. So if we have a look at what I want to do, I want to go through all of the different classes that make up the scale options out there. I want to have a look at how easy it is to get started or how difficult it is. Have a look at the variety and what can be achieved with a little bit of an effort. And I'm hoping that going through this will encourage just a few of you out there to give some of the scale disciplines a try. So that's my hope, my aim. The classes I'm going to cover are those just listed down there, which cover pretty much everything. And I'm going to just have a quick look at, if you guys want to try any of the different disciplines, then what are the ways in to start that business? Now, all of us in most of our disciplines see a lot of these options, but not all of these options are available for all disciplines. And as we go through, you'll see that certain of the disciplines really don't have very much in the way of ready to fly models and so on. And we'll just have another look at that as we go through. Right, so just looking at the first on the list, indoor free flight. Now, I'm going to try and use a phrase that I'm not comfortable with, which is the phrase commitment. And by that phrase, as we go through, I don't mean to imply enthusiasm or a lack of enthusiasm, but to imply that there is a different level, an increasing level of effort and time, and in some cases money involved in going into some of these classes. I haven't found a better phrase for commitment, so bear with me on that. So if we look at indoor free flight scale, then start off in that discipline, what you really need is a simple basic kit which you can put together with confidence that it will fly, and it will also avoid bouncing off the walls too much, so it will survive the first few flights till you get it trimmed. In the picture, bottom left-hand corner, you've got a kit there of the Bird Dog by Vintage Model Company, which is an excellent flying kit, a super introduction if you've not flown free flight models indoors. Well worth having a go at that. They're extremely good kits. Top right-hand corner, you've got a much larger model, which is a 54-inch model. It's a Comet kit from many years ago, the Aeronca Sedan. This one's built by Richard Crossley. It's flying at Nijmegen there, beautifully slowly and very impressive in the air. So that is, if you fancy something bigger, another good way in, the Comet kit. I've said here a bit more commitment, and as I said before, this doesn't mean more enthusiasm. This just means a little bit more effort in terms of preparing the model. This is another Comet kit. This is the Comet Tailorcraft. It's another 54-inch wingspan model. This was built by Mike Stewart and flies beautifully slowly again. Top right-hand corner is another version of that Bird Dog that we saw from VMC. This has got a nice sort of paint finish on it. It's got some nice detailing and lettering. So with a bit more time and effort, you can actually improve the basic kit models to something that is really an extremely attractive and realistic model. I'll talk about the full Monty here, and what I'm talking about here is, generally speaking, scratch-built models that have been built for competition purposes. This particular model is a stamp by Mike Hadland, Butch's son. Mike is one of the top-rated modelers on the indoor scene at the moment. This model, when you look at it closely, and the photo doesn't do it quite as much justice as I'd like, but it is of real museum quality, fabulous quality, and it flies for significant period of time for a model, rubber model, about a minute you can expect from that model. Fabulous stuff. Right, so looking at the variety of stuff that you can fly indoors, indoor flying is extremely good in opening up the possibilities of using your time for flying in the winter time. It's also extremely good opening up the possibilities to get models which are difficult to trim and fly outdoors, make it easier for them to be trimmed to fly indoors, because the air indoors is generally quite still. So top left-hand corner, we've got something which is called a no-cal scale model. This is purely a duration model, but the rules ask for this to actually look like a full-size aeroplane. This is an American racer called the Chambermaid, and the rules this year for the indoor classes allow this class of model to be flown at our nationals. The rules are talking about maximum weight of 6 grams. So they're not super light, but it is a good introduction for indoor building techniques for you chaps that fancy a bit of a go at something a little bit different, a little bit lighter. On the top right, you've got an electric Lancaster which flies free flight indoors. I think this is Peter Smart's model, 4 electric motors in there, flies extremely well, tends to collapse its undercarriage, unfortunately, but it's a super looking model. And bottom left-hand corner, you've got another model there from Pete Smart, and this is a model of the Gossamer Albatross. And this model is built to the peanut rules for indoors. Normally that means a 13-inch wingspan, but there is an alternative 9-inch fuselage overall length maximum rule as well. This model's built to that rule, and it's about, I think, 18-20 inches wingspan, and it flies very slowly, very steadily, covered in mylar on the top surface only, I believe, but lovely model. Now this thing on the bottom right hand side is another beautiful little model. This model, and just take note of these hand-built spoke wheels on there and the engine cylinders. This model is a pistachio model, and that means that its wingspan is about 8 inches. It's built by a French chappie called Christophe Cromazan, and it's, when you look at it, it's just a beautiful little model. So it shows what can be done with conventional materials and patience at small size. The unusual, right. Indoor does allow you to fly unusual models more successfully. The left-hand model there is a D7, as you see, but this is a model that's been converted from a radio control kit into a free flight model to fly indoors, and a few teething problems, but that model now flies quite nicely, actually. But it's a kit by Microaces, a radio outdoor and indoor model kit. We'll look at those in a bit more detail in a minute or two. On the right-hand side there, you've got a Demoiselle, which was built by, who was it built by? It was built by somebody whose name I can't
Pete Cardell.
Thank you very much for that. It's Pete's Demoiselle there. It's a lovely little model, actually. We've not seen it because of the COVID regulations out in the field, particularly. The young lady there, it's CO2 powered. The young lady there, Miss Luscious, I think she was called in, or Miss Scrumptious, she was called in the end. Underneath her skirts there is the CO2 tank for that model. It's quite a sweet little thing, that. Even more unusual, there are a couple of photographs here taken from one of the Nijmegen meetings. The left-hand model is Chancevort Pancake, Chancevort 75, I think it is. This is a twin rubber model, and it flies extremely steadily, which is not really something you might expect from that planform. Top right-hand side is a consolidated Coronado that was built by Richard Crossley. It's 4 electric motors in that. It takes off from a dolly, and it is a very steady takeoff, very steady climb, and it looks as much like the real thing as you might imagine you can do indoors. It is a very good flyer. Right, next one, if I can find my arrow. There we go. So let's have a look at outdoor free flight then. So this is probably where a lot of us actually started out in our modelling sort of careers, building the smaller Killcraft models and so on. The photograph there shows a relatively large model. This is a 64-inch Mercury Aeronca sedan. It was built by a chap called Terry Aiden, and it's an old model. This photograph, this model's about 10 years old. It's powered by a 2.5cc Oliver Tiger diesel, and it flies slowly, steadily, and it looks super in the air, as you can see from that photograph. Now, a lot of free flight models these days are reliant on using the ubiquitous Mills 7.5s and Mills 1.3s, the old long stroke side port engines. But I've just popped a photograph in here of a modern version of those engines made by Alex Finn. These are the Redfin diesels. He does a whole series of capacities from 0.35, 0.5 up to 1.5. All in this long stroke configuration, which are ideal for turning large propellers relatively slowly on free flight models. So engines with modern materials are available. You don't have to scour the auction houses these days to find a motor which will power your outdoor scale model. This is something which is, it's a Killcraft kit. It's an old kit from lots of years ago. These are about 40 inches span, but this particular photograph shows what you can actually achieve with a little bit of work and effort and a nice paint scheme and a few details. This is a Cessna, I believe. And this is, I'm hoping, aimed at the new intermediate class, which we've introduced for 2020, which didn't run because of COVID, but for 2021. I'll talk a bit more about that intermediate class later on, but that model there is an indication of what you can achieve with a bit of work just from a basic and an old-fashioned kit. They're not that easy to put together, I don't believe. I think you might agree with me on that, Andy, because Mr. Sefton's been building one of these as well, or something similar. Right, on to something which is a bit more of a scale model. This isn't a kit model. This is built from an Aeromodeller plan service plan from some years ago, the PZL Wilga. And this is quite a stunning model. It flies very stably, and it's got the sit in the air that makes it look so very different and so very attractive. Right, and so if we start to look at the full Monty that you can achieve with free flight scale models, you've got this Sopwith Dove here. I think this is a Mike Smith model of a few years ago. This is a super flying shot, and it does show the degree of detail and degree of accuracy of lettering and so on that you can actually achieve, but keep the model at a weight which still enables it to fly. So these models are fairly small in terms of some of your models, at around sort of perhaps 40 to 45 inches wingspan. And there is an upper limit on weight for these models of a couple of kilograms, but rarely do they actually approach that a couple of kilograms because of their restricted size. We've got one or two other pictures of that sort of model. Now, that is one of the best photographs of a flying model that I've seen. And that is a Sopwith Snipe, which is one of the models that Mike Smith is currently flying at the moment. It's interesting that you see there the flexibility in the wing fastening arrangements has allowed the wings to take on a little bit more dihedral than you would normally see on the full size. Variety, what we have here in terms of variety, the top right hand corner, we've got a DH10, I believe it is, with the evening sun just glinting off the top of the wings there. So something that's really quite old fashioned there. And then you've got one of the latest models from Ivan Taylor, which is his TSR2, which isn't fully flight proven yet, but that's something to look forward to these years. I mean, these free flight ducted fan jet models are really sort of quite fast and furious when they're going, and they fly extremely well, extremely stably, because of their wing planform, the delta planform being very stable. So just to move on to a quick look at control line. Now, getting started in control line isn't quite as easy as in some of the other classes. There are one or two, or there's a single kit available. I think there's VMC, the Vintage Model Company, are doing this Veron control line Spitfire from many years ago. I wouldn't like to vouch on how accurate that model is, but there is a kit out there for somebody who wants to just have a go at control line with something that looks like a real aeroplane. There's plans available, a lot of plans available actually for control line scale, and it's worth, if you're fancying a go at control line scale and you like the look of a particular aeroplane, it's well worth searching through such sites as AutoZone and looking at the old APS handbooks, because there are a lot of plans out there for control line. One of which is this thing here, which is a Harold Towner device, which was actually a control line model. He did a lot of outdoor free flight rubber models, but this is a control liner that he did. Now, with a bit more effort, then there is more available for control line to try and get in and fly something which is a little bit more interesting. The top left hand there is the Vickers Viscount. Now, there is a part set available for this model from Bel Air, as in fact there is for the Shackleton down at the bottom. These are all plans from the APS service from years ago that Bel Air are now making parts sets for. I've included a couple of pictures there. These models on the right, there's the A10 and the Focke-Wulf. These are ready to fly radio models, but they're of the sort of configuration that can be relatively easy converted into control line models. And I've included them here, and also would say to anybody who fancies going down this route, the SDC Wednesday Zoom sessions a couple of 3 weeks ago, a month ago perhaps, had a very interesting talk given by Danny Wynne Fenton, which actually looked at the conversion of radio models into control line models, and he got a lot of good information in there in terms of the layout of the control system, sweep back of the lead outs on the model, that sort of stuff. So if you're thinking about this, it's worth going back to the video of that particular Zoom session to check up. And I'll say this a number of times: if there's anything in amongst this lot that you actually want to follow up on, then contact the STC and we'll put you in touch with the right information and the right people. What I also should have said at the beginning is, if you've got questions, you notice that each of these slides is actually numbered. So in your questions, if you could reference the slide number, that'll help us find it quickly when we get to the end into the question session. Right, looking at the full Monty here, we've got on the top right hand side, we've got where are we? It's a Boeing B-47 is the model. What I'm looking for, because I've got I've got a bit of information on some of these models. This model, top right hand side, is 67 inches wingspan, and it's got half a dozen 50mm ducted fans in it, and it's got flaps and retracts, and it certainly looks the part. It's an impressive large model. The one on the left-hand side is Nationals winning a couple of times P51 Mustang by Mike Chapman. This is a Brian Taylor radio plan, which has been converted to control line. It's 69 inches span with a Super Tiger 61 in it, and it's got six servos operating all of the functions, operated down insulated lines from the control line handle. So it's got throttle, flaps, retracting tail wheel, retracting main wheels, separate undercarriage doors, retracting and drop tank. So that is that's got a lot of stuff going on in that model. Bit more of the variety. There's World War One, post World War One biplanes right the way through to, this is Ronnie Tribe's ME262 down here on the right hand side. And like I was saying a few minutes ago, if you actually look into the APS plans handbooks, there are a tremendous number of control line models to choose from. And I think one thing that I'd say at the moment is if you are looking at control line, thinking about control line, it has been a bit of considered to be a bit of an old-fashioned way of controlling models, and the following is not as great as it was years ago. But there was one thing about control line flying, and that is that it's the one branch of our sport where you're actually in contact with the model when you're flying it. So you feel the tension in the lines, you feel the accelerations and decelerations of the model, you feel actually what the aeroplane is doing and how it's reacting. Something that is quite a stimulating thing. I know that from my control line flying days in the past, and it is something which we don't experience, generally speaking, in a modeling. Right, on the unusual here, we've got a Northrop flying wing down the bottom there. That Northrop is about 67 inches. We've got at the top right, I can't see this at the moment. I'm assuming you guys can. It is behind a series of images of people here, but I'm assuming you all can see it. That's a Horton 5, that's 33 inches. And then this bottom left-hand one here is a Junkers 287 at 50 inches. So that's got 4 ducted fans in it, that Junkers. And I put in just that little picture at the top there because I found that the Horton organisation is still manufacturing aeroplanes, and this is an up-to-date version of one of their small aeroplanes they'll sell you if you want. Very futuristic looking. So, quick look at indoor RC. Getting started in indoor RC is relatively easy because there are a plethora of ready-to-fly kits. I won't go through all of these, but if you Google micro indoor RC, then you get a tremendous number of options that come up. If you've not flown radio before, then the high wing, the little champ up on the top right hand side is a good starter. Some of these are a little bit more difficult. The Spacewalker in the middle there is quite a good, easy model to fly, flies very nicely. This PT-17 is a bit more of a handful. It's a bit heavier, flies a little bit faster. Spad is quite slow. But there are quite a lot out there, and they range from about £75 to £100, and that actually includes the transmitter for you to fly most of them as well. So a good way to get into radio flying. Looking at what else you can do to get into it, top right hand side, you've got a rubber model there, which is the Keelcraft Piper Family Cruiser. That's now kitted by VMC, as is the Chiltern monoplane down below. And these can be very easily converted into indoor radio at the moment. And they actually fly very well. This is a Comet kit, this Camel over here. This is much more of a handful, and potentially that might need to be certainly trimmed outdoors, if not flown outdoors. But that is an indication of what some of the early American kits can build up into, because that is quite an accurate model, that. A bit more commitment. You've got here a Veron tiger moth. I think this is Ian Pallister's tiger moth on the top left hand side, and this is a nicely built, nicely detailed model, so that takes the Veron kit a stage further. This bottom left hand side, it's a Pieton pole. This one is electric, as it's shown here. It's a kit that's marketed by Micron Radio, who specialise in these small lightweight models. This top right hand side is Micro Aces again. These models are very detailed. They're built from printed sheets of Depron, which are folded into certain shapes to form the fuselage and so on and so forth. They use internal structures which are reinforced by carbon rods and adhesive plastics and so on. And this down here is just an extract from the assembly manual of these things. They take a lot of building, actually, and it's quite difficult to put them together without making mistakes. It's very difficult to rectify mistakes because they're put together with contact adhesive. And when we come to the full Monty, I've been a bit cheeky here. I've included this model, which is a DH9 from George Kandilakis, beautifully decorated, beautifully built and detailed, this model. But actually, it is a free-flying model designed for indoors. However, George uses a technique whereby he installs pretty much full radio in these indoor models, and he uses the radio to trim for the avoidance of damage, really, in the initial stages of avoiding collisions with the walls. But he can then also trim the models at each event to suit the size of the hall. When he's got the model trimmed, he turns off the radio and flies the model free flight. So as an indoor radio model, that is a valid thing to show you there. Beautiful model, beautiful. Right, so in terms of variety, there's a couple of interesting models here. There's this spruce goose monster of a thing, which built by a German chap called Schonli, and it flies extremely well in not that huge a hall, actually, to be honest. It's something like about 13-foot wingspan. And top right-hand corner is something else that's very interesting as well. This is a little P-51 Mustang that's fitted with an 8-channel radio, and it has all 8 channels operating. It's got throttle, rudder, elevator. It's got ailerons. It's also got flaps. It's got a retracting undercarriage. It's got navigation lights, and it's also got a simulated machine gun fire using LEDs and noise. And it's 6 inches wingspan. And he struggled, according to some of his reports, to get it to fly predictably at first. And so he's converted the radio receiver to be a stabilized radio receiver, and it flies beautifully now. So that's some achievement on something that's that size, 6 inches. Right, a look at gliders. What can we do with gliders? Well, gliders, there are quite a number of kits available, actually. So these are just a couple of traditionally built kits here from the Vintage Model Company again. This, the top left-hand side is, it's about 34-inch, that Slingsby. The bottom right-hand side, the Mini Moa, is considerably larger. The VMC do a range of them. I think they do the old Keelcraft one at about 30 inches. They do one at 50 inches, which I think was another Keelcraft one. And they do this one that's pictured here, which is 100 inches. So if you want a bit of a traditional building challenge from a kit, there's a parts kit available for that mini mower there. More getting started. Well, there are quite a number of relatively reasonably priced foam ready-to-fly models. This is a K8. Who does this one? It's a Seagull one, I think. And this is a Fly Hobby DG1000. This one here, which is a later design of aircraft. I've got one of these K8s by a different organisation, and you know, they're quite nice models, really. But they won't break the bank. They're about £150. I don't know what this one is here. It might be a little bit more expensive. So if you put a bit more time and effort into constructing your gliders, these mini mowers here are they're free plans actually from UK forum for scale soaring. These, but they are quite large. There's quite a bit of building going on in there. These up here, they're kits. They're the PIC 120 model of glider, but those are a bit more expensive, those kits, but they make up into a very attractive model, which has a very good performance as well. Now this is a kind of a top of the range thing here. Here you're talking about, this is Czech model, a LET models manufactured kit. It's an Ash 26, it's 6 meters, and it's got, I think it's 14 servos in it. It weighs 15 kilograms, and it's got 4 separate batteries to ensure that it's got continuity of electrical supply. Well, I mean, it's a beautiful looking airplane, but these are a serious amount of money. The variety, well, here we've got some interesting variety. The top left, you've got a tow line, indoor tow line, Lilienthal glider. I think that's a Peter Smart model there, which tows up and flies relatively nicely. It doesn't have a great long duration, but it looks very sweet in the air. The top right hand side, we've got a chap up there called what was his name? He was I forget his name actually. I think he's a Spanish chap, but he is making these small gliders. He's moulding the wings and the fuselage out of Depron, and they are rudder elevator, and they have a minute engine pod which rotates out of the fuselage when he uses the throttle. So it's actually a power glider, and it flies very nicely indoors, glides very nicely too. And of course, these monsters in the middle, you've got the Antonov. That evidently takes 4 people to actually launch the thing. The Boeing, I would imagine, is a bit easier to launch, but these look superb in the air. These are built by a chap called Simon Crocker, and they've had exposure in the modelling press before, but it just shows you the variety of stuff that you can undertake, from that little Lilienthal there to the Antonov. Right, looking at outdoor fixed wing now, getting started. Now, here there is a great choice. You can run from the bottom left-hand side, which is a kit, a conventionally constructed kit, through a plethora of warbirds and all sorts of almost ready-to-fly models, up to some quite, how shall I put it, quite complicated ready-to-fly models. They're ranging from down here at about £100. You're looking at a couple of £100 up here. Up here, you're looking at £400 or £500. But there are a great variety of these things available. If you're a radio flyer, a vintage radio flyer perhaps, and you want to try a bit of scale, then there's a lot out there to try. There's more unusual things as well. I mean, the Dornier up there is quite a crowd sort of pleaser when that appears as a model in any form in any discipline. The Warthog again, the A10, and the Osprey there is quite an eye-opening model as well, although I have a sneaking suspicion that that's gone out of production, that model at the moment, but you'd have to check the suppliers to see there. Bit more commitment. What you're looking at here is relatively more expensive, almost ready to fly models that have been refurbished to varying degrees, and the level that you can take that to is shown up on the top right there with Roger Warman's Super Cub. That Super Cub started out as, I think it was a Pegasus models, was it, if I remember rightly? It started out as a ready to fly model, and I think it was a Hangar 9, I think, in here. And it was, the covering was completely stripped. The structure was altered in certain places to increase the scale outline, to improve the scale outline, and also to improve some of the hinge lines on the control surfaces. Totally recovered again, and then with the new markings put on. That is really quite a super model when you look at it. Shows what can be done with a ready-to-fly kit if you're prepared to put the extra commitment into doing that. That model, incidentally, is of a standard that we'll see flying at our national championships and the world championships probably in 2022. Right, what else have we got? Even more commitment again. These two models, the one bottom left is Howard Pete. This is John Carpenter's. That's on the flying scene at the moment, and it's a super model. John is a bit deprecating about that model. He says it's relatively simple and so on, but it is a fine looking model, and takes quite a lot of commitment to build a model to that level. That's a scratch built model as well, I believe, as is the Hawk Speed 6 up the top there, which is his latest model, John's latest model, which I don't think has been properly test flown yet. Right, so the full Monty. Well, I had to put this photograph in because this is about my favourite aeroplane on the RC scale scene at the moment. It's Richard Crapp's Westland Wessex, and it is a stunning sight. So scratch built from drawings, that, and it performs well to my eyes wonderfully. We've got others here. This is Bristol Fighter. I think this is Steve Jackson's Bristol Fighter, and again looks a supermodel. I haven't seen this model, I don't think, Steve, but it looks a supermodel from that photograph. Now this model I have seen flying, and it flies extremely well. Here's Steve Jackson's Avro 504, and this is one of our top hopes for the World Championships in F4C in 2 years' time. Right, with last section we'll look at now, where we'd go in 2016, not too bad. This is RC helicopters. Now, on this helicopter scene, I am not an expert. This is one thing that I've not tried to take part in, and I don't have very much knowledge. And unfortunately, I don't think our STC expert, Glenn Davis, has joined us tonight. So I'm not sure we'll be able to answer too many questions on that.
I'm here, Doug.
Oh, brilliant stuff. That's really good. Right, Glenn's advice to me and to anybody else to get into scale helicopters is to go outdoors. Let's go back. Let's just have a look at that indoor helicopter. This isn't a way to get into outdoor flying at all, but these things are sweet and certainly look good. I've seen at least one of these flying indoors, and yeah, they're quite satisfying, but they are indoor things. Now, Glenn's advice is to go out and buy one of these machines from Align Helicopters. This is a T-Rex. This is the 500 size, to become really familiar with the maneuvers and flying of the helicopters, because as a stepping stone, that is ideal, because you can then go on and you can buy scale fuselages to actually fit onto that basic aeroplane of the T-Rex 500, and there is quite a variety. I've just picked 4 here, and if you're interested in more information about these, then certainly the STC can provide you with more information. I think we've got an Augusta up the top there, if I'm right, have we? We've got, what is it? Is this a Lynx down here? And what's that? Is that, I'm not sure what that is. I've got
Cobra, Doug.
It's what?
The Cobra.
Ah, that's right, a Cobra.
And the other one's a Black Hawk, not a Lynx.
That's a Black Hawk. What's this thing down here then, Glenn?
That's Airwolf, a Bell 222.
Yeah, that's it. The Airwolf is a film helicopter, isn't it? But it's based on the 222. Yeah. So that is a good way of getting into scale helicopters. And of course, even these fuselages can be embellished to a great degree, as you'll start to see. I don't know much about this one. I know that, where are we? It is an MD-500, the helicopter itself, I believe. But it has been embellished with a lot of nice extra detail on there in the police colour scheme there, and it looks rather pretty. I put this in the more commitment class, Glenn, because I think this probably took a bit more effort than some of the earlier fuselage conversions.
There's a lot of 3D printing on that one. Took about 6 months to build.
Right, okie doke. And when we talk about the Formonti, the most detail and the most accurate, then there's a couple of pictures here of a Seahawk top right and the Whirlwind on the bottom left there, both super looking aeroplanes. The thing about helicopters is really that the technology is pretty much far in advance of what we use on all of the other disciplines. There's a lot of high-end engineering goes into these, and there's a lot of 3D printing, a lot of modern techniques, and so they are a different kettle of fish to the, say, for example, the gliders or the indoor radio. But if it floats your boat, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there to be able to experiment with. And from the point of view of the unusual, I've included this sweet program here. It's a Huey, I believe, pulled by a radio-controlled Jeep around the flying field and up to the flight line, which is rather sweet, I thought. So unusual things to see as well. I've listed a few suppliers there. One or two of the things I've referred to as I've gone through. There are many more. So if you're looking for stuff and you want to get into the scale scene, then just ask us, because we're here to help. You know, contact through the STC secretary, Paul Rich. He's the sort of center point for all the information that comes into and goes out of the STC. And if you want to listen to me rabbiting, yeah, then contact me on that number, that email there. So that's about it at the moment. And thanks very much for listening. I think I've just about made it in time inside the hour. So I've not got my knuckles wrapped today. So that's good. Over to you,
Doug, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. You haven't escaped yet. You've got another 8 or 9, 10 minutes of questions, one would hope. You've got your support. You've got your small army of panelists with you, which is wonderful to see, and always welcome to anybody who's putting on one of our sessions. Got a few questions here to run through. I'm not sure you want to answer this one, but you can do if you want. Hi, Doug. This is from Robert Harris. Are you still living in Derby? I live in Derby and fly at Delta Hawks near Packington. Bob.
Well, Bob, I still do live in Derby, and I fly indoors in Shawbury, which isn't in Derby, and I fly outdoors at the Derby Flying Club, which is in Mickleover, and I also use Buckminster quite a lot these days. So email me and we'll get together and have a natter.
Right, Morris Dyer. This is for John Carpenter. I always have trouble with paint on my scale models. What was John Carpenter's Hawk Speed 6 painted? In anyone know? It looked very realistic. Well, we've got the man here, so let's hope he can tell us.
Well, I hope you can hear me. My Hawk Speed 6, difficult to talk about it because it's an absolute nightmare to paint. I got it, everything you could get wrong in painting, I did wrong. Finally, I got it right by stripping a lot of the paint off and starting again. So it was a really, really long job and one I will never repeat. It's just a question of getting paints that are compatible. Guess what I got wrong? So in fact, the black paint is rattle cans. There, I've said it. It is painted over. There's a gloss proofer over it, which is an acrylic, a 2-pack acrylic, which I found compatible with the rattle can acrylic eventually. And the rest of the airplane is done with acrylics, a 2-pack acrylics, which are quite expensive, but at least they're compatible with each other. Does that help?
That's going to help, I'm sure. If not, they've got some emails to contact you. Mark Aris, if building and entering the scale model for competition, I understand some paperwork is needed, perhaps an assumption. What's the requirement and the general rule?
Well, I think it's not possible to be specific because the requirement does vary between the competition classes. And there are some classes that are designed to be very simple to encourage newcomers into scale competition. And there is a kind of an intermediate step, but we call it intermediate scale, which doesn't require the same amount of documentation. But for the classes which we term open models, which are like the F4C models for the full-size radio and for the open class models indoors, then the documentation requirements are quite stringent. They're stringent in terms of the accuracy of the aeroplane is primarily to be determined by photographs if they're available, and such as drawings and so on is a secondary means of judging the accuracy of the aeroplane. There are also recommendations and issues in terms of how you present the documentation as well. So it makes it easy for the judges to give you the marks and easy for the judges to actually see what you're trying to model. So I think the thing to do is drop us a line and say what sort of stuff you're interested in, and we can send you some more useful information in slow time.
Brilliant, thank you. Paul Rich asks, you mentioned the VMC kits as being a good entry-level kit into scale competition. Can you recommend any other models from the Keelcraft Flying Scale or Veron True Flight ranges?
A lot of the Keelcraft and the Veron models have been updated by VMC, and I would say to people that go to them for one of their kits because they do go together very well and very easily and very accurately as well. But there are a lot of models in those two ranges which fly particularly well. If you are an absolute beginner, then I would always recommend the Piper Family Cruiser. That's the Keelcraft high wing Piper, which has the largest wing area of all of the models in those two ranges. If you want to stay with high wing, there are all sorts of other high wings. There's Taylor Crafts, there's Cessnas and so on. But the Piper Family Cruiser is the one that's got the biggest wing area, which means the lowest wing loading, which means the best chance of flying.
Brilliant, thank you. A regular of ours, William Le Mesurier, how do you convert a Micro Aces kit to rubber power?
Well, that's an interesting one. I would be thinking twice about doing that. Basically, because the structure of the Micro Aces models, because they're aimed at radio, there's a bit more structure in there than you really would want for a rubber model, particularly down the back end. So if I was actually thinking of converting a model, I would look first of all for a model in the Micro-Aces range that's got a long nose, and then I would look to see how much of the structure of the fuselage I could take out of the back end. In terms of actually just converting it to rubber power with a bit of reinforcement on the fuselage sides, then a motor peg would go quite well. You'd need to think about where you position the motor peg, because it would want to be pretty well equidistant with the prop from the centre of gravity position. So you wouldn't want to be putting it right down the back end because you'd need a lot of nose weight to get the centre of gravity right. It's an interesting thing, but I've not contemplated converting one to rubber. You should be the first, I think.
Right, another one for the team. Kenneth Morton asks, I've seen vinyl wrapping done on Scale planes and the results are fantastic. Do you think the same process would work with a Scale helicopter? Glenn, need to unmute first.
That is a good question. I've never used the technique, so I can't really answer. I'm not exactly sure whether it would be robust enough, because you've got all that airflow coming down across the fuselage. So most Scale helicopters tend to be made from fiberglass or some form of plastic. Yeah, no reason why you couldn't try it. I'm always up for experimenting with new things. To be a helicopter pilot, you've got to have a good sense of humour, so and a big plastic bag. But yeah, I'll try it. Yeah, give it a whirl. Try it. It'll either work or it won't. And if it doesn't, you always cover it with fiberglass.
Brilliant. Thanks, Glenn. Michael Campbell asks, I'm doing some CAD drawings for a 1 to 3.5 scale Rhineland glider. Any guidance of sources of information for the structural design and sizing? Quite specific.
Yeah,
I guess
I'm not.
It's me then, Doug.
Yeah, okay, John, if you can think. Yeah.
I've got some books produced quite a few years ago, but they're still obviously valid, on structural dimensioning of spars and various structural elements on gliding. So if you want to contact me, my email is on the Scale Tech Committee website under the committee. If you drop me an email, I'll take it offline, because there's a lot of information that I can give you, and there's a lot of scale documentation areas that I can help you with as well, but it's not for this discussion. I can take it offline and answer your question then, if that's okay.
Brilliant. A question for John. Well, we've got two Johns in the room, so this will be interesting. Has he still got the bruises from our hang gliding days? Who's laughing first?
Nobody.
Nobody.
It's John Carpenter, that one, not me.
Yes, I couldn't unmute. I haven't still got the bruises, because it was 55, 60 years ago. But yes, that was in the days when hang gliding was in its infancy and nobody had regulated it at all. I have very fond memories of it. Can you tell me who was the gentleman who made the inquiry?
Sorry, let's go back down. Sorry, I should have said that. Derek Ibbotson.
Oh, I thought he was dead.
Right.
Evening, Derek.
Moving on, a couple of questions from Roberts.
Can we edit that out the recording?
No.
He's gone live to the world.
Right, two questions from Robin Strange. How do the various competition groupings work, and is there a category for scale gliding competitions?
Well, I don't know if you want to answer this, John, but in my researches for doing this presentation, I did discover that there wasn't really a formal class or category for scale gliders. it surprised me really. And one of the things that I want to do with the STC going into the future next year is see if we can actually make some kind of link with the Scale Glider community and see if we can provide them with anything that's helpful to them and so on. I mean, we have a number of names, contact names, and John Minchell will be able to provide us with those and a link into those people. But at present, there doesn't seem to be a great interest in running Scale Glider competitions.
Doug, if I could just add to that.
Please.
There used to be slope soaring scale competitions, which were judged similarly to the current F4H or standoff UK rules for power fixed wing competitions, but they died a death in the sort of 80s and 90s, and many people now do fly scale gliders on the slope and on the flat. So on the flat you'll have an aerotow meeting, which is basically a fly-in where people will be flying anything from 3-meter wooden construction models all the way up to 7-8 meter molded stuff like the top end stuff that Doug showed. But it will be a fly-in and there won't be an element of competition. There may be a bottle of wine or something like that as a first prize for a pilot's choice of the best glider or the best flight or something like that, but nothing actually formal as a competition. And exactly the same goes for slope soaring scale get-togethers. They are fly-ins. Chris Williams is one of the guys down south that flies at White Sheet, and John Greenfield, who a number of you will know, sets up various aerotow meetings at Buckminster. I will be doing a couple at a new private airfield in Shropshire at Sherlow in the year, but those are flat field thermal soaring scale glider events. And then the various slopes around the country, there'll be fly-ins for chuck it off the hill like Simon Cocker's big Antonov and the B-52. Those are power scale soaring, and the Great Orme in North Wales, assuming lockdown and COVID-19 allows us to get back up there. There's 2 or 3 events on the Long Mind in Shropshire. There are a number down at White Sheet and various other places around the country. So to answer the question, formally, no, there is no actual competition at the moment, but there are scale get-togethers and fly-ins if you want to support those.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Last 4 questions. Stuart Willis, is there any issues with 3D printed items on scale models in competition?
Well, the simple answer is yes. And it's a current issue that we're trying to deal with and find a way forward through. And we are in the early stages. We've identified all of the problems we think exist and the issues that exist. And we, as the STC, need to find a way forward on how to deal with that. And the way forward on how we deal with it may be different for the different disciplines, because like I was saying on the helicopters make much use of pre-manufactured items to create their models, whereas the indoor free flight models don't. So it may be we have to deal with them differently when we statically judge those models. The other thing is as well is that the FAI's aeromodelling body, CIAM, has just recently asked the STC to be involved in their discussions, which are just starting, on exactly this issue. But it's wider than just 3D printing. It's CNC controlled machines. It's well, it can even be as simple as commercial vacuum forming, commercial fuselage manufacture. There are a lot of issues which we've identified indicate a difference between manual handcraft skills and information technology based skills. And we as an organisation, as does the FAI, need to decide on whether or not they want to reward the IT-based skills, the information technology, the CNC machining, the printing, 3D printing and so on, whether they want to reward those as highly as they do the manual skills, which is the traditional way we've always operated. So there's a bit of a change going on at the moment, and in a couple of years we might have a decent answer to that, but we don't have one at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. Bob Harris again. I'm looking for a Cessna Caravan, about 60-inch span electric RC. I'd like it to promote Mission Aviation Fellowship. The Caravan is their workhorse and they provide vital communications in developing countries.
I don't know of one offhand. I don't know if any of the other guys do. We could certainly have a look and see what we can find in our archives in terms of that aeroplane. That's all I can offer at the moment, I'm afraid. I mean, if you've not found anything on the internet that's helpful, come to us and tell us exactly what you're looking for, and we'll see if we can help, basically.
Brilliant, thank you. William Lim, Missouri again. Is it a good idea to balsa sheet VMC models to add strength to the model? If so, what would be the best way to keep the model aircraft lightweight?
Don't do it.
There we go. Fantastic.
I think if you wanted to infill between stringers in the nose region, where you would be using nose weight anyway, and then sand away most of that projecting wood to get a nice cowling representation, then by all means do that. But in terms of sheeting on wings and so on those small models, you don't want to add the weight. You want the lowest wing loading possible, because that flies the slowest and it does the least damage when you hit the wall.
Brilliant. Now the final question goes to all 6 of you Scale panelists, and you're basically you're going to have about 5 seconds to think about this and answer. No longer, please. So this has come from Morris Dyer. He wants to put all of you on the spot. Who was your favourite designer and scale modeller?
Well, I have to say,
Brian Taylor.
My inspiration was Tony Day.
Tonda Alfrey from the Czech Republic.
Good choice.
No one fell on stony ground. Can I give them one more question? It was a question answered by Andy Simons, and it was, I'm just trying to find it very quickly in the answer group. I can't remember who it was from and I can't find it, but essentially the question said, how did COVID affect free flight in 2021? I think the question was something Doug might like to add. Sorry, Andy?
I think the question was more, how have regulation changes affected free flight?
How have regulation changes affected free flight?
This is COVID regulation changes, is it?
No, I think it means more CAA and the ARSA and registration, etc.
Right.
Basically answered it hasn't.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. I mean, what we've said on free flight scale is that if your model is of a weight that needs it, then you can, if you can't discreetly hide it inside a hatch or inside the cockpit out of easy view, then it won't have an impact on static judging. If it has, by virtue of the type of model, have to be external, then the judge's guide will say when it's published that that if it's discreetly placed on an area of the model, because it's regulatory is a requirement, then it won't affect the static judging. COVID, in terms of that affecting free flight, we were very lucky because you're outdoors on an airfield, and we managed to run a series of competitions for free flight scale outdoors, which were relatively successful, not very well attended, unfortunately, but we managed to award some trophies this year. But on the other hand, free flight indoors has been a bit of a disaster because the Indoor National Championships was cancelled. The majority of indoor meetings have been cancelled. And we're moving into a new year now where we're not really very comfortable that we'll be able to move indoors again in the early part of the year at least. So, you know, we're probably looking into late summer before we can even get indoors again. So, you know, not good.
Doug and everybody, look, thank you guys. I think that has been amazing. We've got through all the questions. I think there's a few lingering ones, but we'll get those offline. Just like to thank you all for your time this evening. Andy, next week, I think we've got control line speed and
Yes, Dick Hart, isn't it?
Dick Hart.
Yes.
So we go from one extreme to another a little bit there. So should be rather good, fast and noisy, I hope. But I'd like to thank everybody. And again, if anybody out there has got any more questions, you've got some contact details. You can get us on the website, put those through, and we'll make sure they're fed through to the right person. So yeah, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yes.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed.
Mark, thank you, Andy.